Hello, everybody, and welcome to GCP GroundSchool presented by SADA. For this session, we'll be talking about infrastructure modernization. So today's topic focus will be around those who are on-prem, utilizing things like VMware or on-premise bare metal environments, and are looking to make that migration and modernize within the cloud. My name is Seth Moffitt, and I'm a senior cloud engineer here at SADA. My role is to help customers understand the cloud, what makes GCP unique, and then also assign for long-term success as we go through these modernization efforts as Google releases new products, new features. Really here just to make sure that our customers are aligned to take advantage of all the latest and greatest that Google has to offer. I've been with SADA now for 4 years. Prior to that, spent 4 years designing hardware within the data center, so very familiar with the Dell portfolio, VMware, Hyper-V, and all the other things that you need to take advantage of making a hyper-redundant environment when looking on-premise. So the first problem statement is that macro challenge. Migration and modernization is necessary, but it's very much intimidating. And so back in the days, being able to own and operate a data center and your technology from hardware all the way to the top of your application stack used to be a differentiator. Not so much anymore. With agile companies coming into the field, into the market, and challenging pre-existing legacy companies, never before have we seen such accelerated growth and adoption of new technologies that more or less feel like they're springing up overnight. And so for those who are stuck within the on-prem, delaying time to realize cloud value leaves companies at, once again, a competitive disadvantage. We want to be able to address our customers, be able to give them the new features and functions, and really the things that they're wanting to see in their application in order for them to be successful at their jobs or in their personal life. For those who aren't able to address those needs or those market shifts quickly, are surely going to be taken advantage by those who are more nimble. And so that's really what the drive is for the cloud, is being that nimble of a company, being able to have new feature releases tested and ready for production faster than we've ever imagined before. But obviously within this high reward comes a high risk, and complexity, cost, and the risk of migrating it to the cloud can really stop a business in their tracks. Without having the skill sets internally to adopt these types of practices, being able to migrate to the cloud is a major move that not a lot of companies out there have the skill sets or the knowledge or even the time or personnel in order to do so. And so these are a lot of reasons why people like the idea of cloud, and it becomes much more and more adopted, but still isn't fully adopted by those inside the ecosystem or those out in the compute world. And so what we want to talk through today is for those who are still on-premise, those who are in VMware, is that there is a easy hop for those that are wanting to go ahead and start to take advantage and move their way quickly, accelerated, but safely to the cloud platform. And recently, Google has released its VMware as a service engine. Effectively, what this is dedicated hardware living within Google Cloud Platform and managed by Google for end users or for companies to effectively take advantage of. And so, as we had as discussed before, these new technologies for developers can be intimidating. Those refactorings to your applications can take time. Not every application can just simply go into a container and scale up in Kubernetes. There's a cultural shift. There's a technology shift. There's a personnel shift or skill sets that need to be adopted in order to move to this new world. But at the end of the day, if there's a way to go ahead and pivot some of those components of it, where you can keep those skill sets, keep those applications, but start to alleviate yourself away from the management of things like hard drives or servers or networking, then that in itself is a value gain. And so this is one of those first steps that we see when moving to Google Cloud for customers that are in that environment. Being able to take your vCenter, your VMware environment, and all those virtual machines with it, and simply move that to Google Cloud Platform. Now, it seems like a normal migration or even like a DR strategy, and more or less it is. It's a very quick alternative to instead of adopting the key compute or VM infrastructure and networking and firewall rules that you'll see within the cloud providers, but still having backed by a Google Cloud Platform. So it's the latest and greatest, and it's the best engineers out there taking care of your hardware while you still own your stack, and you can say with certainty that your applications are going to continue to run even though you're in the cloud. So what do those key pillars actually solve for by moving to VMware as a service? Well, once again, ease of migration. A lot of people know how to do vMotion. A lot of people know how to use VMware SRM. So there's a lot of those cool tools that we're used to today, or even having to move off of old hardware to new hardware with it when hardware deprecation cycles or new hardware refreshes come up. And so really no refactoring and no having to maintain those the infrastructure or even licensing that we had before. Lower cost. So being able to leverage Google's cloud economics of scale gives us the ability to buy servers in the hundreds of thousands versus before, maybe we're only procuring one or two or tens or hundreds of servers at the time, depending on the size of your company and the applications that you're looking to support. Running securely. Security is a very broad topic, and we could probably spend our own session just talking about that. But within Google Cloud Platform, you're able to take advantage of those lower tiers of security that we used to have to think about all the time on-premise. Is my data center compliant? Is the physical access and these links compliant? Do I have the right encryption within networking or on disk? All of these are all taken care of by Google, by the best security experts in the field within the entire industry, and are at our disposal when building these resources. So we can rest assured that we have a full-blown security NOC with some of the best engineers taking care of and watching our infrastructure at all times of night and day. Within this new platform, just because you're locked into VMware doesn't necessarily mean you're stuck to using VMware and just in a managed cloud provider. It actually opens up the door to GCP products that are more or less right next door. They're there within the Google network. They're there within the same console. And so you can start to, it feels like and actually looks like from an application perspective that the cloud is right next door within your LAN on Google Cloud Platform. And so that allows just a single operational continuity, unified management, single pane of glass for your operations, your developers, for those who are interacting with the hardware environment or with the application environment. And as mentioned, the innovation is there. The key ones we'll talk through here today are things like Cloud SQL, and as well as Google Cloud Storage and networking. But the rest of the Google product suite is right there in our grasps. This simplifies the networking. This simplifies security. We're not having to connect a hybrid environment for you to go take advantage of a BigQuery within Google Cloud or your new Kubernetes instances, or even to be concerned about things like latency, where if you have to reach back into a database or stateful set that's on premise to serve your applications within the cloud, this starts to lower that, and all of that complexity really just comes down into a single cloud platform for you to run business as usual, but to continue to innovate in a much more agile fashion. One of the key things that we can take advantage of right out of the gates is reducing your VMware environment total cost of ownership. And in proper Google fashion, we're going to go ahead and throw up the other cloud providers up there, just to go ahead and show that this is a competitive offering amongst multiple cloud providers, but there's a reduced savings by using Google Cloud Platform. To pick on the on-premise environment, because we want you to come to the Google family and SADA family with us, but these are the different types of costs that you're having to think about to support your on-premise environment. These are just costs for the VMware environment. This doesn't associate things like development time. And so when you start to look over to the left with the different other cloud providers out there, the other categories are simply not there. The storage hardware just is completely removed. No more buying SANs or sizing the number of disks that you're going to need or what type of disks I need to serve this particular virtual machine. And no longer are we stuck and locked into the hardware provisioning or the licensing provisioning that we buy today when it needs to be something else tomorrow. These are all flexible things that are always readily available, self-service, things you pick out of a catalog, to be able to deploy right there within the Google Cloud VMware environment, and for your virtual machines and your applications to take advantage of right when you need it. And so all this sounds great, Seth. We want to be more agile, we want to save money, and we want to be able to not have to swap out disks whenever they go down. So this all sounds great, but it still sounds like something we've never done before, and you may never have to do again once we get to the cloud. So why haven't we done it? So today we're going to go ahead and talk about the migration methodology. So what exactly do we need to do to ensure that this is a nice, safe switch over? It's not a flip of the switch. There's a methodology to this. This is your business critical applications. You're embarking on a new adventure and landing in a new destination that you're probably never going to want to have to go through again. So how do we ensure that this is a very safe move for everybody involved? So first and foremost, discover and assess. Before we touch anything, before we even move that first bit over, we need to understand the environment. what do you have today? What are you looking to do with it? How do these things start to communicate with each other? Once we have a good understanding of what that dependency mapping looks like and the way that you're using these applications, your developers and your operations are interacting with these machinery and these technologies, then we start to create that narrative as to, okay, here is how we start to move these things over. So that's where we go into plan. And so where we start to plan, what do we need to move? We want to find those high value, low effort or low risk types of applications to really prove the validity of these migrations. Picking something like a business application, not a business critical one, but perhaps an analytical dashboard. Not everybody's working 24/7 on using this dashboard and being able to review sales numbers or reviewing what the market trends are looking like. Maybe that's a good candidate. And so really to start easy and to start moving those things over in a much more fluid fashion to one, make sure that we have continuity between point A to point B, that nobody starts pinging the help desk or putting in more help desk tickets, because I'm sure we need more of those, but more so for us to show the validity and for us to understand and feel and now be able to interact with Google Cloud, because it's going to be a new world. I harbor no illusion about that. But to find something that we're familiar with, such as a application you guys hold close to home that drives immediate value for the business, becomes those perfect candidates for us to move. Once we kind of move those things over, we're in good shape. We now have understanding of the migration methodology, and we continue to plan out how is the rest of this going to move. And then from there, once we've picked that path, we decide that this chunk of applications or these chunks of resources or this team is going to move here, when, and why. We then have the path forward to get you to the cloud. And so there is a number of tools that we'll go into here on the next slide. But really the biggest component of why we want to move to the cloud is that cost savings. And we don't want to forget about that. The way I like to describe migrating to the cloud is like moving houses. This is your perfect opportunity to be able to get rid of the old furniture that you're not using anymore. Sure, you're going to bring your computer, you're going to bring your refrigerator, but maybe you don't want to bring that old couch. Maybe you have a bigger living room now and you want to make sure that you have something that's going to fit that. Or maybe you've downsized within the bathrooms and you can't bring everything that you brought over. These are those perfect times to be able to optimize that and right size your environment so that you're not over provisioned, you're not spending more on resources that actually don't need to utilize them. And so within that migration phase here at SADA, really we like to plan things out in a much more granular process. It's not a matter of just looking at the boxes and putting these to kitchen. It's really breaking those things out and understanding how are these applications viewed and what is going to be their future state. And so through our migration factory or our change factory, this is where we determine those risks, the level of effort, the complexity of choosing the potential path forward. Some applications out there, something like Exchange Server on-premise, should probably be looking to go to Office 365 or probably better, G Suite. And so at that point, that might be an Exchange Server that should be retired, something that could be decommissioned. Other things need to retain on-premise. You probably need a DHCP and gateways and routers and networking on-premise so you can continue to go to the internet. But as you start to move down, as you see here, things like rehosting and replatforming, is this a lift and shift type of migration? Or is this what we have coined here as a move and improve? We're taking this application that's been a monolith for time that doesn't scale at all, if at all, very well, and breaking that apart, throwing it in containers, moving that to Kubernetes, implementing that CI/CD pipeline that everybody seems to talk about at those conferences. Those are those times for us to really break those pieces out and be able to have their swim lanes as we move those to the cloud. And at the end of this, once again, to finalize it all, it's always about optimization. So it's not just put it up there and over provision it and hope that the extra resources lets it continue to work. We want to be in a world where we're really cutting away at the fat and making sure things are optimized down to the right size so you don't have to pay a penny more than you have to. And so your migration journey might look something like this. It's going through each one of your applications on a week-by-week basis, being able to chunk them off, break them out, categorize them, label them, tag them, make sure we're all on the same nomenclature. And at that point, start to put together that project plan where obviously there's a finite number of hours and finite number of virtual machines you're going to have on premise. So let's start to articulate what do those phases look like. And it's something as simple as this migration journey here, a little bit more narrative around your particular environment that we would love to have those conversations with. Is it rehosted? Is it replatformed? Is it replaced? Or is it retired? And once we start to divvy that all out, it's time off to the races. And so the SADA migration factory here is really a cycle. It is constantly coming back to that assess, plan, migrate, optimize, assess, plan, migrate, optimize over and over and over again, because every single one of your applications is is critical. That there's a reason why you still have it in on premise. There's a reason you're still using it today, and every single one of them should be treated with that due diligence and that due respect. So as we go week by week or month by month over this environment and move these things over in that methodology, in a safe methodology, to Google Cloud Platform, we want to ensure that we're all in alignment as to how this is moving, when this is moving, why this is moving, and then at the end of it, completely optimized to ensure business continuity, happy end users, and a very happy CFO if in case we don't want to see a very expensive bill. So some of us may not be fully ready to go to migration, and that's fine. There's maybe you just bought your hardware, or maybe you just bought a brand new application that you're deploying now, and you can't really just flip the engine out on a car that's moving. Or maybe you are go ahead and modernizing in place in a way, shape, or form. Doesn't mean VMware as a service is out for you. Disaster recovery is well supported. Once again, it's just VMware on the other side. Maybe you're looking for that easy switch for a new SRM site. Instead of you having to buy the exact same data center that you have at site A, and having to mirror that over at location 2, why not just have location 2 up in the cloud? In the case of a failover, disaster recovery, you're failing over to the cloud, and so at that point, you've gotten yourself into the cloud. So it's kind of an unintentional migration, but nonetheless, having very high SLAs, having very strong networking, having strong resources that you can rely on, Google becomes a solid choice for your disaster recovery location or destination. So about a year and a half back, Google acquired Velastrata, which was a migration services tool for those who are on cloud providers or within VMware to move their virtual machines to the cloud. And that technology has now been recoined or retermed as Migrate for Compute Engine. And this tool here plugs right into your VMware environment, cognizant of everything that's within vSphere, within those virtual machines, and can be used in such a way to be able to not only migrate these tools over, but to plan it, to assess it, as well as even to test these things. If for me, when I'm talking with customers and wanting to talk through migrations or talking about even deploying a new application, it's always about measure twice, cut once. This is a one-time initiative, hopefully. So make sure you're doing things right. You don't want to have to have an excuse or have to come up with a documentation as to why something failed during the migration. Tools like Migrate for Compute Engine have that baked into it. Be able to take your virtual machine, replicate that data, spin up a shadow copy while in the cloud, and test it. See what it looks and feels like while running in the cloud. And when we're ready to go ahead and migrate those over and flip the proper switch, all that's taken care of for us. And I want to go ahead and highlight that this isn't just one-off virtual machines that we're migrating over and having to click and click and click over and over and over again. This is really an automation runbook, a programmatic way to bring over bulk and mass virtual machines over in a timely and secure fashion. And so within this suite here, very simple to set up, very simple to configure, and very simple to deploy. Really the messaging and creative what Google Cloud has to offer. And to the narrative of optimization, right-sizing recommendations come right out of the box. So if we're going to be having what we used to believe was a very big application with 16 cores and 60 gigabytes of RAM, our tool is keeping us honest on that, letting us know maybe CPU wasn't utilized that much. Maybe we're not saturating as much RAM as we actually need. Or, yeah, you've been using SSD within that virtual machine, but you really only need spinning disk. All those right-sizing recommendations come right out of the box for you. And not to just call you out that maybe you gave a little bit too much or too high or expensive resources to your pet project, but more so to just keep us all honest and say, hey, let's go ahead and go towards that optimization side of things. And so it doesn't just throw that number at you; it actually applies that in flight. And so when we say that the 16 cores needs to go down to 4, it's not just saying, it's doing, and it's deploying that for you so that when you land on the other side, you're in a much more optimized state and can rest assured that you're not over provisioned anywhere within the provider. So to break into the tool a little bit further, let's talk about live cloud testing. And so it's not just about taking that image and moving that up to the cloud or like a backup. This is real replication. We're deploying a tool an agentless tool within your VMware environment, picking that virtual machine and replicating that data bit by bit over to Google Cloud. once we're running in the cloud, we can now interact with it, feel it, start to communicate with other products within GCP, such as Cloud SQL or maybe the firewall rules, just to see how this is going to work. If we don't like it, we can go ahead and turn it off and spin it back down, and turn off that resource in Google Cloud Platform, all while leaving your virtual machine up and running and performing just like it's always been within Google Cloud. So non-interruptive. But once again, in the case of an actual migration, if all signs point to yes, we're getting green lights all the way down, it's once again a quick flip of the switch. Those things are moved over, traffic is cut over, and we're up and running in Google Cloud Platform. And so for your hardware and architecture geeks like me, what does this actually look like? Well, it is a virtual machine that sits out to the side of it within AWS, or once again, vSphere plugin for those of you who are on premise, that's able to listen and be able to offload that processing and to bring it up and securely, notice that Cloud VPN there, up to Google Cloud Platform through our firewall rules into your designated landing zone. And then from there, we can test, we can test, we can migrate, and at that point just continue to run in that cloud. And so, Seth, this all sounds great, but we got petabytes worth of data that we need to move to the cloud, and we only have such a finite pipeline coming out of our data center. Well, you're right. But I also want to talk with you about partner interconnects as well as direct interconnects from Google, that we can have a dedicated MPLS line over to Google Cloud. Or maybe even we still have the ability to do site level bandwidth throttling within the application itself. And so, as mentioned here, we can throttle that background storage migration. We can go ahead and prioritize applications so that we're not choking out your day-to-day traffic or end users trying to connect to your applications as we're going through this migration effort, to ensure that you always have the performance that you need from an egress and internet connectivity while still maintaining and moving forward on this migration path forward. And so some things for us to look forward to once we get to the cloud here are things like encrypted data, not only at rest like we may be used to on premise, but also in flight. These are some of the benefits that Google provides us, because this is just how they were built. The networking at Google is all software defined. It's all encrypted between two different virtual machines, between two different products, between an API that Google exposes to us. So we can always rest assured that we're always taking advantage of the latest and greatest within security. High availability is now at our disposal. Maybe you've been trying to roll out a high availability plan or a DR plan, but just didn't have the budget for additional hardware or didn't have the space to deploy another rack full of servers. Well, within the cloud, we got plenty of that. And with being able to configure that becomes that much easier when we're able to spin up virtual machines in a cold, warm, or hot standby methodology. So it's not just all or nothing. It's where we may have to think of before, where even the most low value application, to have that in HA requires its own dedicated virtual machine and physical hardware to support that. Those are things that are great candidates for cold startups, where maybe we're not flipping over the switch right then and there, but the moment there's an outage, we can spin that up as quickly as that VM and that application is ready to come up and serve that traffic. Non-disruptive rolling upgrades. I guarantee you never seen anything like this before. The way Google rolls out updates to its underlying hardware is nothing short of magical. It's what they call brownouts within Google Cloud, where it's not a full blackout. It's not a have to turn off and restart your machine to be taking advantage of new physical hardware. Google manages the migration of your virtual machines from one physical asset to another without you or the application ever knowing about it. And so you're always taking advantage of the latest and greatest within hardware, within physical security chipsets, within the brand new CPUs. It doesn't need a new hardware refresh cycle for you to take advantage of Intel's latest and greatest chips. It's maybe just as simple as deploying that application to that new one, or maybe just restarting the VM if we could take that outage. But once again, you're never married or stuck to that physical core, or that virtual core for that matter. These things are readily available to you the moment Google makes them readily available. And so, what do customers typically look at when trying to go into the cloud? Well, for those who use VMs with VMware, then Compute Engine's right up your alley. This is Google's VMware or VM offering to be able to have custom virtual machines. If you want 2 cores and 128 gigs of RAM, you could do that. And these are all triggered by APIs. Being able to have an immutable infrastructure, be able to have auto deployments with code, with script, with things like Terraform, may not have been possible on-prem, or just may not have had the developer skills or really just the foundation in order to go do that. Well, now you're in Google. Those APIs are available. Those Terraform scripts are yours to use. Start deploying, get your hands on it. And once again, if that product or that feature doesn't quite work out, that application, or maybe that code was not quite working the way we want it to work, we're not stuck with provisioning all that hardware for a science experiment. We just turn those things off. And so that's really those value of the cloud. And those are ultimately very strong ways for you to be able to move your existing VMware virtual machines over to that next kind of hop up the stack, utilizing things within Compute Engine. Once you're ready, of course, as we talked through before, refactoring or replatforming is always the key here when moving to the cloud. VMware is just a single hop on your cloud journey. And so from VMware over to Compute Engine, up into things like Kubernetes, or VMware to Kubernetes, or to serverless. It's really just a matter of what we're looking to do from a development standpoint. And for those of you who are looking to take advantage of something real slick right when you get there, look no further than Google Cloud SQL. So for those of you who are on virtual machines and have to manage your own MySQL or PostgreSQL or even Microsoft SQL, Google has a managed service offering for that, a database as a service. And these spin up incredibly quickly. This is another one of those tools that can be used in that new development world. Maybe a developer wants to be able to take their application and test it on its own dedicated MySQL virtual machine, or Postgres, or Microsoft SQL. All of that includes the infrastructure. It even includes the licensing. So you don't have to reach out to your provided vendor to get the licensing that you need to deploy these services. Google's taking care of all that for you. And these things will have automated deployments for things like high availability, for read replicas, and going into that world of flexibility and horizontally scalable, being able to provision multiple read replicas if your application needs to really hammer on that database for its use case. And then when you're not using it, let's say the end of the season is done, scale those on back down. And at that point, really only paying for what it is that you're using. And once again, that applies for both the hardware and the licensing. And so with that, I hope everybody learned a little bit here of what Google has to offer. Once again, if you're on-premise, physical or virtual, and on VMware, looking to make those hops, but just the cascading amount of virtual machines or the work that seems to be there, two things to look at. Google Cloud makes it easy for us to do so with the solutions and products that it has available to make development faster, to take management off your hands, to give the developers the agility that you're looking for, as well as SADA. We're here to be that consultation, be that guidance, to take those learning curves and make them more of a straight line for you to learn these products, for you to be able to get hands-on with them. And when the time comes, we're more than happy to get with you early to talk about what does these migration steps look like in much more granular detail. And so, for those of you who want to stick around, I'll be staying here for the Q&A session. So if you have any additional questions and want to bring those to it, come on with. Otherwise, Seth at sada.com. More than happy to answer your questions about GCP. We can talk on-prem and hardware if you'd like, but really here to be that technical advocate for you to make sure you're successful when looking to Google Cloud Platform. So with that, thank you everybody for attending. Really appreciate your time and your attention in such a crazy world, and looking forward to talking with you all soon.